Hello and welcome to the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. I'm your host, Joel Harrison. As the title of this podcast suggests, it's got a very broad remit covering a huge scope of evolving challenges associated with generating trust and influencing buyers in all areas of B2B marketing. Now, these are tough challenges, but they're taking on a new urgency and resonance in what's a really fast changing landscape. And episodes are released weekly. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, or rate this episode of podcast. We'd love to have your thoughts and have you on board for more episodes in future. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about the issue of trust in go-to-market strategy and why that matters. Trust is vital in GTM, not only internally between the various parties involved to enable cooperation and good faith, but also externally, more critically. Buyers can sense when an organization has got its act together. They perceive fragmentation, misalignment, and execution strain, even if it's not explicitly discussed. And conversely, organizations that operate with real operational discipline, aligned priorities, and clear accountability signal trustworthiness, and that trustworthiness directly impacts on buying decisions and customer loyalty. So very recently, I was lucky enough to attend the launch of a new report called the GTM Confidence Gap or Confidence Index, and which seeks to kind of talk about the disconnect between how ambitiously B2B leaders are chasing down growth and how confident they actually are in executing it. We're really talking about a trust problem. So what the research showed, lots of really exciting findings from this, which we're going to talk about in this episode. Only 9% of leaders are highly confident in hitting their 2026 target, yet over half of their organizations are aggressively pursuing growth. So that gap signals to buyers that something is not quite right. So to explore this in much more detail, I'm talking to Teresa Allan, who's managing partner of Magnus Consulting, who have created this GTM Confidence Index report in which they identify and really explore this gap. And Magnus have surveyed over 100 senior B2B marketing commercial leaders to identify the 5 systemic gaps holding organizations back. And we're going to talk about what those are a bit later on. The good news is that these are fixable, and the fixing them builds internal confidence and buyer trust. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what the GTM confidence gap actually is, and why only 9% of leaders are confident in their targets, how confidence correlates with trust, and what leaders need to do, most importantly, in the next 90 days to start closing the confidence gap. So to talk to me about all of these things, I'm really delighted to welcome to the show Teresa Allan. Hi, Teresa. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Joel. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. Lovely to talk to you today, as usual. And as always, we catch up and saw you recently at the B2B Marketing Awards, which was great. So always good fun. So great you could be here, and lovely. Thank you for joining me today to talk about this. It's a great issue. I should say it's a sponsored episode, but we're going to be exploring this in lots of detail. So looking forward to exploring all of the aspects of this, which is a fascinating topic. Teresa, let's just set the scene first of all. Let's tell us a bit about yourself and about Magnus Consulting and what you do and what prompted you to build this report in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who don't know, Magnus Consulting is a B2B growth consultancy. We're recognised as one of the leading management consultancies in the UK by the Financial Times. We're also a certified B Corp. But essentially what we do is help our clients in B2B understand where they should prioritise their efforts, where they should play. So identifying market opportunities, whether that's going into new geographies or into new sectors, or really doing a deep dive into who exactly is their buying, and then helping them work out how to get there. So building out go-to-market strategies, but also building out the teams that are needed to deliver that. So we do a lot of team design, sales and marketing alignment, process optimization, and beyond.
And you personally have been involved in B2B for a long time. That's how we know each other. I mean, you worked with in previous roles at agencies and clients and things like that. You've worked with a number of, really embarrassment riches in terms of kind of top tier B2B brands. So, you've been around this space for an awfully long time, and hence go quite.
I've been around the block a few times.
In a good way, I mean, right?
Yeah, and I think actually, just that's why we set up Magnus. We saw there was a disconnect often between what agencies were doing. And not saying that they weren't doing a good job. They often did a brilliant job, but it wasn't necessarily the job that was needed to move the dial at the business level. So there was a disconnect between the business strategy and what the commercial teams were actually kind of then tasked with doing. So Magnus's aim is to fill that gap and to really connect, where businesses are going and their objectives, through to what the commercial teams make for them.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So it's a great scene set. So let's dive into the research because it's a great report and lots of detail. And it's really approaching a challenge, an issue from quite a different angle. So as we teased earlier on, your research shows that only 9% of the B2B leaders, B2B commercial leaders, are highly confident hitting their 2026 growth targets, yet over half of their organizations say they're aggressively pursuing growth. And that's a massive disconnect, right? So I'm curious about the trust dimension. This when leaders lack confidence in their own execution, how does that read to buyers, and how do you see the confidence gap manifesting itself as a trust problem?
Yeah, firstly, we kind of 9%, that's less than 1 in 10 feeling confident about the year ahead, which is a pretty uncomfortable place to be. But for us, the confidence comes from a lack of alignment, and actually being certain that they're able to deliver against their goals. And if you reverse that, what does this mean from the buyer? What's the experience that they're getting? If there's no alignment internally across the buying process, then the buyer's going to feel that. They're going to feel that fragmentation, as you said, that misalignment, that lack of cohesion and trust. So you've got to reverse it around. Always start with the point of view of the customer and actually think about the experience that they're getting, and is it joined up? To marketing, have clear hands-off to sales. To sales, have clear handoff to customer success, if that's the team structure.
Okay.
If there isn't, then there's going to be a confidence issue.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's so critical. All those organizations just always moving parts of the organization having the cohesiveness and the belief in each other, they're going to be able to move it forward. So it's hard to imagine those ambitious targets going to be hit if that's not the case. So there's a fundamental kind of building blocks challenge going on here. So tell us a bit about what actually drives or lifts confidence. Is it about having bolder strategies, or is it about having the better operational fundamentals in place, things like budget alignment, integrated systems, clear processes, or is it something else?
Yeah, fundamentally, confidence isn't about bold claims or even bold strategies, but it's what sits behind that. It's about having that operational integrity, and loads of things that sit behind that, and it is those fundamentals. So do you have consistent pipeline reviews? Do you have clear accountability? Is your investment aligned with your ambition? Ultimately, they're the things that are going to drive confidence, having those elements in place, because they know that then they're able to execute. I think that, the confidence or commercial growth isn't built in the boardroom, it's actually built in the engine room. And that comes from having a really good rhythm, discipline, and shared understanding of what your role is in the organization and how you work with everyone else. It's also about having the fundamentals of the data as well, and the building blocks to be able to have visibility on how well you're doing, and what's coming down the line.
I mean, a lot of what you talked about resonates and has been talked about a lot in terms of obviously the challenge of the data, right? That's a challenge we've had for 20 years or more. And, a lot of that plays back to sales and marketing alignment. But what I'm taking from this is it's much more fundamental than that. It's much more than just that sales and marketing alignment piece. That is important part of it, but it's more kind of like more fundamental than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally fundamental. And and I'm sure we'll dig into it a little bit further, but the reason I come back to sales and marketing alignment is because it kind of encompasses everything. Do you have a real kind of but do both teams have clear ideas about where they are actually going to spend their time? So have you identified your ideal customer profile? Has that come, or are you just going after the people that you've always gone after because that's what it's been? So where is that biggest opportunity? And then how do you organize yourselves behind going after that in the most effective way? And that's where the alignment comes in. But it starts with having clear priorities and a clear plan that spans both teams. And then the enablers to be able to do that, that's where we come into data and the tech and communication, and pipeline reviews and all of those elements, that operational elements that we're referring to. Ultimately, it all needs to come together.
Yeah. Okay. It's bringing the thing together and making it workable and functional. So loads of great data stats in your report, but one of the ones that was really interesting was that data shows that leaders who are confident in their pipeline are 9 times more likely to be confident in hitting their growth targets. I mean that's pretty understandable. It's a massive correlation. Why is pipeline conviction so decisive, and what does pipeline confidence actually signal about the rest of the organization?
Yeah, and just to kind of break that down, it's kind of those people who are confident in this quarter's pipeline are then confident about the year ahead. So, so there's an immediate kind of, I'm confident I'm going to hit this target this month, this quarter and beyond. And really that comes from having that, as we're just discussing, kind of that operational maturity. They've got these building blocks in place now. They're clearly working because they can see that they're going to hit their targets this quarter. And 9 times out of 10, that's not a surprise. That's because they've got the fundamentals in place. They've got the effective targeting. They've got the qualification criteria, and that cross-functional ownership. So, it tells us that the revenue engine is already working. It's signaling kind of there's things in place that, that's been done behind the scenes.
But I guess it's the argument about jam today, jam tomorrow, isn't it? There's a danger of marketing being dismissed as fluffy because they're saying, oh, there's going to be some good stuff that comes around the corner at some point, or in the future, but not when we might need it right now. So being able to really live and die on that numbers in this quarter, I think that's going to make everybody much happier, and again breed confidence between the functions and all the key stakeholders.
Yeah. And if they'd hit, if they're hitting targets in this quarter, and that includes marketing hitting their targets as well as sales, something's happened beforehand for that to happen. There's understanding of the role in the organization of marketing and sales. So, never are you going to just go to marketing and say, we're going to miss our quarter. Can you do something about it? Well, probably not. No, but actually, if you know that you're on track for the quarter, then something's already in place.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing things right. So it's an indication of good practice and great alignment. Okay, so loads more great stuff to dig into in this report. So you found that where growth targets are fully supported by budgets and headcounts, 20% of leaders are highly confident. Where they're not, 63% fall into low confidence group. And that's a massive swing. So I'm struck by something else in your research. 57% of leaders report no increased investment at all. So how are CMOs supposed to build confidence when they're being asked to do more with flat or shrinking budgets? And that's happening a lot at the moment. We're hearing that a lot anecdotally in the market. What do you think about that?
The more with less conundrum. Yeah, I mean, we pretty much see it across the board with clients, right? But it's at least everybody's under the same pressure, so it kind of levels out the playing field. But fundamentally, it comes back to working out where you're going to spend that pound, and coming back to confidence of knowing that the pound that you do spend is actually going to have a return on it, so you're putting it in the right place. And that comes from insight and not hunches. So, when budgets are tight, and it's not just budget either, it's about capacity tightening. Often when budgets are tight, headcount is low as well, and they haven't necessarily got the skills that they need to do everything that they want to. So you've got to make some decisions, and it's critically important that prioritization around decisions and actions is made up front, as opposed to, well, we'll carry on doing what we were always doing, or, that kind of worked last year, so we'll carry on doing it this year. Actually be really clear about where you're going to spend that, where you're going to spend that money. Again, coming back to where's the biggest opportunity, let's focus there. And then building alignment around that. So if marketing are going to do a sector campaign, let's say on life sciences, what are the sales teams doing to support that? Are they actually kind of seeing the whole thing through end to end? Or are they going after a different sector because that's where they think that they can play? That's not going to have the best return. So it's about being clear about your priorities, and then being clear about how you organize yourselves internally to really go after that in a focused way.
So is it as much to say there's almost a bit of denial sometimes in organizations because they don't want to accept there might be some bad decisions or tough choices they need to make, or not bad decisions, tough decisions given difficult circumstances, and they're just kind of hoping that situations will change and all that bad news will go away. Am I reading that right?
I mean, I think sometimes that's the case, or sometimes, they know that it's not going away, and they're kind of almost paralyzed by that, inability. In their worlds, I can't do anything. We hear that a lot. I can't do anything. We haven't got any budget. That's not exactly true. You can do some things, but it's about making sure that what you are doing, you're doing it with confidence that it's the right thing to do. It's tough out there, right? But at the same time, if you're kind of data led, and you've got kind of a real clarity on where the opportunity is, then you're probably more likely to reap a reward.
Okay. All right. Now, this is a marketing podcast, so we're actually legally obliged to talk about AI. So the next question is about AI. 88% of leaders, according to your data, are exploring or using AI. I mean, that's not a surprise. But actually, what is disappointing and a bit surprising as well is that only 12% are describing the impact as transformation, at least so far. 34% cite a lack of skills as a top barrier. So AI adoption is high, but integration is low. What do you think is going on here? And is this typical of early stage adoption chaos, or is there something more systemic about how teams are approaching AI, or perhaps not approaching AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it is a maturity problem. It's definitely not an interest problem. Everyone's talking about it and everybody's dabbling as the data shows. But for us, the immaturity comes down to how it is used effectively, much like what we've seen before where MarTech started to come into play. If we flip out that 12% who are seeing kind of transformational results, I really want to ask what that 88% were expecting from testing it. And actually, did they empower and upskill their people to use it effectively? And I suspect the answer was no. AI is only as good as the user directing it. The critical thinking still sits with the human. The adoption also sits with us. So it's early days, but we're definitely seeing that those leaning into upskilling their teams to make sure that they're empowering them to have that critical thinking are the ones that are going to get.
So Teresa, we talked about AI. Another fundamental in terms of this whole process, one of the challenges that marketers face to try and create alignment and build confidence is MarTech. And your survey had some interesting findings about that. Only 11% of leaders describe their tech stack as the best in class and integrated. Nearly half are operated fragmented system. And this is probably the most striking thing, is that leaders find integrated stacks are 5 times more likely to be highly leaders with integrated stacks are 5 times more likely to be highly confident than those with fragmented systems. But 53% of organizations are just in maintenance mode, replacing tools ad hoc rather than building a coherent strategy. So why is MarTech integration so hard, and why does it matter so much for confidence?
I mean, firstly, it matters because if you don't have a connected system where you can visibly see what's going on, from one stage to another, and you're not confident in the data that actually sits behind it, then how you can plan is impossible. You've got no certainty and no visibility. So you can automatically understand why confidence hits rock bottom. In terms of MarTech itself, the reality is it's relatively new in the grand scheme of things. And it's also changing and developing all the time. As well as customer data getting more complex and the ability to capture it. So if you put those two things together, no wonder people feel like they're behind or they haven't got the latest iteration of it. And that leads to two things. One, people keep flitting and changing because something shiny and new comes out over here and they're like, oh, let's try that instead. But the reality is with the customer data that sits underneath it, it's often messy. And we all know that if your data isn't tidy, you can have whatever great platform on top of it. You're not going to get what you need from it. So it's not the tech that's the problem. It's the data hygiene that's the issue. And fundamentally, we know that IT are often bought into this buying process to upgrade or do a project, and they've got bigger fish to fry most of the time, so it creates this perfect storm of, keep putting the sticking plaster on what you already got. And coming back to the last question, hope AI might come along and fix it. But if you can't kind of sort out your data and you can't sort out the fundamentals of what is it that you're trying to align behind, do you have your sales stages kind of mapped out? Are those fundamentals in place? Then you're never going to get there.
I'm sure if it's reassuring or disappointing that, I've been doing B2B marketing for almost 25 years and we're still talking about quality of data being the fundamental thing which is holding it back.
Well, it's hard, right? I mean, we have the same thing too. It's you think you're on top of it, but fundamentally it comes back to the people problem again, the same as AI or people don't follow a process necessarily to save things in the right way. And they don't like kind of using different tools and platforms if they don't have to. And data sits everywhere from spreadsheets to everything else. We see it all the time. Sales teams don't upload and update their Salesforce and you're behind before you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's It's a lot of perennial problems at play here. Okay, so let's talk about another aspect of this, which is identified was cross-functional alignment, right? And that's that's hinted about that all the way along the line of the conversation so far, and I'm sure it's something that this is nothing new to people, but the report definitely highlighted there are 5 key gaps in this area. Only 27% of leaders describe sales and marketing as fully unified, and where they are, 28%, only 28% report high confidence. Where there's siloing, confidence drops to 0. But alignment isn't just a cultural problem; it's actually a structural issue. Is that right? I mean, it's about shared metrics, unified data, and joint accountability. What does this look like in practice from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, silos kill scale, kill the ability to scale, right? Like, if you can't have a single team aligning around, again, coming back to that, we always talk about being outside in, not inside out. Outside in is, what's the customer journey? How is that mapped out? And how are you rallying internally behind it? And quite frankly, I'd love to see a day where we don't have a marketing team and we don't have a sales team. We have a commercial team and everybody knows their role in that customer journey and they work singularly behind it. But I've been banging on that idea for the last few years, but no one seems to be with me on it yet. And hopefully in the next few years. But it surprises me how many organizations just, because they're sitting in different teams, they identify that they do things differently. We often bring them into the room together and so many times they say, oh, we've never done this before. We don't really talk to them that much. And that's fundamentally where it breaks down. So it's about having clear lines of communication and clear roles and responsibilities and ultimately like the same KPIs. You've got to be working towards the same goal. And that's got to sit with what are you trying to achieve with the customer and what are they doing? It is fundamental, but it's as teams grow and organizations grow, complexity grows, communication breaks down. And it's nothing more than that. It can be solved, but it sometimes feels like an impossible task to unpick behaviors that we were just discussing in the last question, unpicking processes and getting people to do things in a different way. That's the hard part.
Yeah, and I guess this is your discussion. You've expressed this really clearly. One of the reasons why go-to-market seems like a compelling notion, even though there's an element of, it's a new acronym in B2B, is that it's a way of reframing this conversation. It's not just about marketing and sales occasionally collaborating. It's about just trying to drive everyone together and having shared objectives and talking the same language, et cetera, et cetera.
Which starts with the customer, not what you're doing internally. You've got to rally behind that.
So one of the most interesting, exciting bits that was really great about your report, you kind of really exposed the kind of the polarity between the mid-market and the kind of the top end of the sector. And your research showed that 3% of mid-market firms, that's companies with 250 to 999 employees, are highly confident. Meanwhile, PE-backed organizations are under even more pressure with a huge gap between ambition and confidence. So why is the mid-market being squeezed so hard? What's different about this organizational size that plays into this dimension?
So often what we see is a reoccurring pattern of they've reached that level of complexity that we were just talking about. So people and process starts to kind of fall over, but they haven't necessarily got the resources and the budget of those larger organizations to be able to solve it. And they've now got less agility than the scale up. So they're stuck in this kind of what we call messy middle. If you then layer if they're PE backed over this, they've got increasing pressures coming from investors to say, we need to see results quickly. And that's not necessarily then giving them the chance to build the foundations for more of a long-term growth. What's got them to get to mid-size doesn't necessarily get them to where they need to go next. And we see this all the time. Their growth has usually come from some external factors, so they've captured an external need of a customer, but they've often scaled very quickly and they haven't built those right fundamentals that we've been talking about all the time to be able to then get to the next stage. So we see that growth plateau. And it comes down to having clarity amongst those growing teams about what are we doing, who are we going after, and that ways of working, and that real kind of clear plan for them to rally behind. So everything that we've been talking about, it kind of it's heightened at that messy mid-size, where they're growing, there's more complexity. they haven't got the fundamentals in place.
Okay, so that's that kind of mid-market area. But obviously, when you're talking about global organizations, right, complexity is inherent in that, right? And you found companies managing complexity across multiple regions or global markets show the weakest levels of confidence, nearly half in the low confidence group. North American leaders are more confident at 22%. There's an interesting kind of cultural aspect to that. What's the difference? Is it just complexity, or is there something else about how different regions are approaching GTM strategy?
I mean, I think if we look at our American counterparts one is a really interesting stat for me, and I was kind of I've been reflecting on it. Is it cultural? And we work with a lot of global organizations, and we have many American clients, and we have many European clients, especially and the European clients, they vary very differently depending on whether they're in the Nordics or France or in the UK. Very different culturally. And I think one of the biggest things is the ability to make a decision fast. And we see in the US, there is not that collective kind of decision by committee as we see in some other cultures. And there's a really interesting McKinsey study that stuck with me a few years ago that said that leaders who make decisions faster, not necessarily the right decisions, but just make decisions and keep that momentum up, are 2 times more likely to achieve their financial returns. So I'm guessing they're making some good decisions. And I think that's maybe where this confidence comes from, because if they're able to make a decision without having to go through multiple lines of kind of committee decision, then their confidence is going to be higher.
There was fascinating discussion about that in the Jolt book, which I expect you probably read, where they talk about the kind of Colin Powell model of decision making and how much you need to know before you can effectively make a decision, which I thought was fascinating. That they talk about no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, whereas they went in knowing that they were never going to be perfect. They couldn't be perfect. They shouldn't be perfect, and they've got to do what they've got. And that was revolutionary for me, I thought.
Yeah, and I think, that is, you've probably hit on something there, is that, that kind of perfect gets in the way of progress, right? And if you then look at some of those other factors we've talked around about, I haven't got enough budget, I haven't got enough people, so therefore I can't do this, versus, well, actually, this is what I have got and this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So talk about moving forward. I mean, obviously the report has got us great stats and understanding about deep dive into where we are right now, but also it's got some practical stuff. So you laid out a roadmap with 3 horizons: 90 days, 6 to 12 months, and 12 months plus. If a CMO or a commercial leader listening to this is thinking, we're definitely the low confidence group, what's the one diagnostic action they should take in the next 90 days to start closing that gap?
I mean, I think it's interesting. If you think you're in the low confidence group, I would sense check it. I would encourage them to, to do a survey out there amongst the different commercial leaders to say, how confident are you? And why, and what's getting in the way of that confidence? Where do you think the inability to hit that target is coming from? Because that's going to surface probably some truths of where you need to focus. So is there a gap in pipeline, budget, tech, AI? And if it is budget, then what are you going to do about it, as opposed to worrying about that you haven't got enough and managing expectations? I think then it comes to having that clear prioritization of actions, again, sitting within the realities of your world and your budget and your capability, and then rallying everybody behind that. So it's not trying to boil the ocean. It's actually identifying where there's potential struggles, understanding and being heard to from the teams as well, to be like, I'm not feeling confident about this. Actually creates a platform for people to surface kind of their concerns, as opposed to carrying it with them and constantly kind of running and feeling like they're hitting themselves against a brick wall. And then I think it's kind of look what you do have in a positive way, share the small wins, kind of align around those metrics, enable the investment that you have. And it comes back to kind of keep talking, keep that communication, those lines of communication open.
Okay, really great practical steps there. And I think it's breaking down those points of where confidence is struggling. I guess the kind of closing question really would be, do you think confidence should perhaps be a more formal metric, and tracked and reported at board level alongside pipeline and revenue? You mentioned it's a leading indicator of growth readiness. Of course it is, because of all sorts of reasons. But does it make sense to turn this into something you actively manage and measure? And what might that look like?
100%. I mean, for us, this is not a soft metric. It's an absolute predictor of growth, alignment, and, to your first point, buyer's trust as well. So Why at a board level would you not want to have that visibility of how confident are the team feeling? And it needs to be looked at in advance. So whether it's in the quarter or a half year in advance, let's track it and then actually look at what happened. So let's look back and see what that gap is. And were they right in calling out where they were lacking in confidence? And that's going to help you then understand where you need to have focus. So by giving people that platform, you're able to, you're not hiding things under the carpet and hoping for the best. You're actually having an adult conversation about it.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I can feel that I can see the importance of confidence, and what underpins confidence is trust, right? So the two things kind of go very much hand in hand. So it's a really great report, and I think it's helped my understanding of the kind of notion of go-to-market and why it's important, why it's different as well. So Teresa, thanks so much for coming on the show today to talk about it. I really appreciate your time. It's always fascinating talking to you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Joel. Nice to see you.
Well, you're welcome. And we're going to make sure, so if you want to download a copy of the report, it's well worth having a look at. We'll put a link to that in the notes or in the text that goes alongside this, wherever you may consume this podcast, whether it's on various different platforms or formats. But for now, thanks to Teresa for joining us. If you like this episode, please subscribe, please like or rate this episode. And we'd love if you could join us again very, very soon. There's loads more great content like this about the issues of trust in B2B marketing. And I hope you can join us again very, very soon. So from me, for now, goodbye and see you soon.